Welcome to the Catholic Table Talk podcast. This is where everything Catholic is on the table. New episodes Thursdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on most podcast platforms. Here's your host, William Sauber.
And welcome back to Catholic Table Talk podcast, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for another episode this week. Episode 251 is in progress, and we're going to talk about Peter and kind of Jesus gave him the keys of heaven, right? And there's a book on it that I think you all should really know about. It's called The Peter of Galilee, a Shepherd of the Early Church. You can find it down in the description down below is a direct link. It's authored by Dr. Robert Shaffern. And just a little bit more about the book. I mean, it's really, like I said, it's a fisherman from a backwater province of the Roman Empire. He became the rock upon which the church was built. No figure in early Christianity is more compelling than Simon Peter. He creates his life from the shores of the Sea of Tiberias to the circus of Nero, revealing a man whose very human failings make his ultimate faithfulness all the more remarkable. Drawing on Scripture, the Apostolic Fathers, and lays archaeological evidence, Dr. Shaffern reconstructs the world Peter inhabited, the bustling fishing economy of the 4th century of Galilee, the fiery uphealing of Pentecost, the Jewish Christianity communities of Antioch and Rome, debates among Jewish religious and authorities, the politics of Roman Judea, and the brutal persecutions that would end his life, like Jesus predicted, or foretold, I should say. Along the way, he eliminates the enduring bond between Peter and Paul, traces Peter's influence in the writings of Clement of Rome and Irenaeus of Antioch, and follows the thread of tradition to the bones discovered beneath Barnabas Basilica in St. Peter's Basilica. Now, I know I probably mispronounced a couple of words. Really a fascinating book, and we're going to kind of talk about what's different from other books, and I'm going to get the doctor's opinion on one of the questions I've been really thinking about prepping for the show. A little bit more about Dr. Robert Shaffern is a Chicago native who, at the height of his education on Catholickt and medical medieval history from the University of Notre Dame in 1992. He has been a professor of history at the University of Scranton since 1995, prolific author of books and articles. Shaffern has written on religious and critical issues in Fourth Things, Crisis, and the Catholic Thing. His latest book is Peter of Galilee. So without further ado, let's welcome on Dr. Shaffern. And Doctor, thank you again for your time tonight and coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, William. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, Peter is one of the more known people, and a lot of people relate to him. But there's a lot of kind of books out. There's a lot to know about Peter still, but then there's not. So
yeah.
What makes your account of Peter's life more different than those way out there?
It's kind of in the middle, actually. I mean, Paul, in terms of all the stuff that's written, Paul tends to get more press. Actually, of course, he's the main figure in the second half of Acts, and there are all those epistles that he wrote. There's not quite as much direct material from Peter, but there's material that we can make indirect inferences from. And what I try to do in my book, Peter was the kind of fellow that we used to refer to as a working stiff.
Okay.
He worked hard for a living. Anybody who knows anything about fishing for a living, it's not easy, and it is dangerous. Even when the weather's good, there's always a chance of the boat heaving one way or the other, and you're losing your balance and so on. He had a business, a small business. His brother Andrew was his brother in the business, and they had partners in the figures of James and John. The town in which that he grew up in, Bethsaida, was lost for a long, long time. People were looking for it, and was only discovered recently by archaeologists. And one of the things that was going on in Bethsaida was that the fishing enterprises dovetailed with salt mining and distribution, because it was the only way to preserve. It was the only way to preserve the catch in those days.
Okay.
And if you remember to the story of the miracle of the fish and the loaves, the Gospels tell us that it was salt fish. So it was a fish that had been prepared, and who knows, maybe somebody in the little lad that had those things was dealing with somebody that Peter knew or had worked with, and obtaining it. And he was a married man. He had a mother-in-law who was still alive, suggesting that he was kind of young. So he had a wife, presumably he had children. We don't know for sure, but tradition says that he did. Along with all that, he was, without doubt, as the Gospels portray it, the most eminent figure among the apostles. He's always listed first in the list of the apostles. He and James and John, whatever the great events of the Gospels are recorded, it's those three who accompanied Jesus. The other fellows are sort of left at the door, I guess.
Sure.
And of course, there are times where Peter is the one who asks Jesus questions about his teaching. He wants Jesus to go on a little bit more about what the story he has just told, or what maybe he has just mentioned in an address to his listeners. So he's an interesting guy in that he's very human. I think I think a lot of Catholic dads can relate to Peter very well. He was a lot of what's on our minds were on his mind too, and I've always had kind of any author, if they're to write vividly about the topic, you need to feel some kind of connection with that. And I've always felt kind of connected to St. Peter. I took his name from my confirmation name, and I've always firmly believed that I've really enjoyed his intercession among my friends, among the saints. He's one of my special friends among the saints.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he was, back to your point about he was married. I don't think I really knew that until The Chosen came out. And I'm like, wait, was that actually true? I mean, I know it's, and it's like, that's true. I'm like, you know what? At least I wasn't taught that, growing up in faith formation. No offense to any of the faith formation teachers out, that I had, but it's like, I wasn't taught that. It was, he was Jesus, kind of right-hand man, but he wasn't, he didn't hear anything about that. And how recent was his town we discovered?
I think within the last 10 years.
Really? Okay.
There were another major find that's pertinent here is back in, I'm pretty sure it was 86. But Israeli archaeologists were digging around the shores of the Sea of Galilee, Sea of Tiberias, which is much smaller now than it was in antiquity. It was a bigger lake. It's drying out, essentially.
Sure. And
they found a fishing boat in the lake that was about 26 feet long, which is again, talking about Peter as a businessman. I mean, a boat of 26 feet represents a fairly substantial capital investment. Now, we don't know if this is his boat, but considering what we're told about the catch that they sometimes were able to land, right? It probably, his boats, plural, because they helped each other out when they were actually on the lake. But his boats were probably about the same size.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I used to have a boat. Mine was 18 feet long, and I thought that was kind of large for our family. Now this one is more, more than 8 feet longer than that.
Right. Yeah, my brother has like 18 foot, and my dad has like a 16, 17 foot. So yeah, that's like you said. I mean, you think, the sea, you're like, the big lake. You're like, that seems kind of little out there. But back then, like you said, that's a big investment.
Yeah.
For a very dangerous lifestyle.
And so, yes, it can be. Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, like you mentioned, you took Peter for your confirmation state, which is really cool, and I'm sure a lot. I mean, if I don't mind, if I could just ask this quick question, is why did you take if you don't mind sharing, why did you take Peter as your confirmation?
Well, I mean, again, I always felt this sort of connection with him just from hearing the stories, at Mass every Sunday in the readings of the Gospels, and the fact that he was, as you say, Jesus's right-hand man. I thought, well, if I'm going to get anybody's intercession, Jesus's right-hand man is going to be pretty good,
Right. Yeah.
But it wasn't just that. I mean, for instance, one of the most famous stories about Peter in the Gospels is the story of the denials.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've kind of reflected on, and a lot of people have reflected on that story, but one thing that I don't think gets thought about often enough is that when the temple guard come to arrest Jesus on Gethsemane, all the rest of the disciples they bail, they split, they run. Okay?
Right.
But Peter sticks around, and so does John. Scripture tells us they both followed at a distance. And remember that Peter had just boasted that he would never deny Jesus. Jesus says, "You're going to deny me 3 times before the cock crows." And Peter says, "No, no way. I'm your man, so don't worry about it." And true enough, Peter follows along at a distance while Jesus is, brought to the first stage of the trial, essentially. And so he's there. And, the thing is, he nearly pulled it off. He was nearly as good as his boast in a way that nobody else in this, in that story is. Right. But at the 11th hour, his nerve failed him. It failed him after being interrogated by these people who were also in the courtyard. And then he denied Jesus. And, I've sometimes said about all this, I said, this is a real Catholic story in miniature, if you will.
Right. Because
Peter, when he was boasting about this, he was sure of himself. He was sure that he could do it. I've got this. But then when it got that much harder, he failed. So, he didn't have the grace to succeed in that particular scene in the scriptures. And so, although, by nature, he's a good guy, he follows Jesus and he wants to do right by Jesus. He's a good follower, and Jesus clearly believed in him. But without that little infusion of grace, or perhaps a large infusion of grace, who knows?
Yeah.
He can't follow up on what he said he would be able to do. And of course, we all know that without God, to do things that are blessed, right?
Yeah.
Requires grace. We need to be open to that. We need to cooperate with that, and then continue to cooperate with that throughout our whole lives. But that's so to me, that story is a kind of encapsulation of the whole of what our Catholic religion teaches us about who we are, where we've been, and where we ought to be going.
Like, well said. And I mean, just with like you were saying, I mean, he's a lot of people kind of see themselves in Peter, and like you say, he's boastful. He's, it's like same thing. He thinks he can do it, and the same thing, with us. But without God's grace, without having God in our lives, letting Him have control, we can't really do much at all. So, like, I'm guessing that's probably another reason why you chose to write about Peter. But then also, if you don't mind, Doctor, is, I mean, why do you think you can do justice to Peter?
Well, I hope that I have.
Okay.
I did my best.
Okay. That's all you can ask for.
In one sense, the book's 94 pages long. There isn't a lot of material to work with.
Sure.
We have the Gospels. We have he's the major figure in the first part of Acts. We have some related stuff, however. The writings of the Apostolic Fathers, Clement of Rome and Ignatius of Antioch, who I point out in the book. I said they were almost certainly, both of them, proteges of St. Peter.
Sure.
Because Peter first spent some good amount of time in Antioch, and then he went on to Rome. And these apostolic writings, as they're called, situate both Clement and Ignatius within a kind of circle of which Peter was the leader. There are other texts as well. There was a 4th century church historian by the name of Eusebius. And Eusebius is useful here, even though he's 300 years later, because he was using, we know he was using, an earlier Christian figure by the name of Hegesippus, who had, written a lot about St. Peter. Now, most of the works of Hegesippus are lost. They haven't survived.
I was going to say, I don't think I've heard of them before, I would think.
Yeah. But Eusebius preserves a few of that, or a little of that material. So that's good for us. And then you also got to be remembered that the early Christians knew of they called the Gospel of Mark the memoirs of St. Peter.
Really?
Yeah, and so Mark was another one of Peter's proteges.
Okay.
And Mark shuttled, he's also called John Mark at other times. And John Mark shuttled between, being with Peter. He also spent time with Paul. He was probably a relative of Barnabas, who was one of Paul's associates. So what Mark has to say in that gospel, it's something where we ought to think, well, what Mark is writing down, because he wasn't an apostle himself.
That's true.
What Mark was writing down, was based on what Peter had taught him and what Peter had related to him. So again, the direct stuff is somewhat limited. But if we sort of poke around a little bit, this is what historians do.
Right.
Some of these other connections can also be made.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, well said, and like I said, it's probably that's the reason why I never heard of him, because a lot his stuff got lost, and which is quite a shame, because just think of what else we could have known if it was if it was all lost.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is part of studying the history of the ancient world, regardless of the topic.
Sure.
That much more has been lost than has survived to come down to us.
Right.
And that's just sort of a professional hazard, I suppose.
Yeah.
But here's another thing too, and
Sure.
This question, sometimes you hear, well, why wasn't this recorded? Why was this mentioned? Et cetera, and so on. remember that the Christian community was a persecuted community.
True.
And, from very early on, the Christian leadership said, if you don't have to get martyred, don't. Okay? Stay out of trouble. Okay? Go into hiding, this and that. We don't, the Christian leadership said, don't go looking for this, because this is trouble. And as a consequence, when you're a persecuted community, think about, for instance, Jews under the Third Reich.
Yeah.
In the 20th century, you don't leave a lot of evidence around for the authorities to bring against you if they want to do you harm. So, I think what a lot of what was happening in those early days, particularly, is that a lot was going back and forth orally for a couple of reasons. One was security, and the other was that hardly anybody could read or write in those days anyway. I mean, literacy was hard to come by, especially for the kind of guys that the apostles were, fishermen and whatnot. These guys weren't reading much.
Right.
And if they were reading, they weren't writing.
Right. No, very valid. And I think a lot of people, some people might forget about that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, if you're, who was it? Was it James and John who was out with the Father when Jesus called them?
Yeah.
Who was it? Yeah. When, I'm in there fishing with the dad, and it's like, that's what he probably did when he was young. And it's just, yeah.
I mean, you can imagine poor Zebedee in that situation, right? Now, he's the
Sure.
dad. So, now again, if you know anything about like a fishing business, the older guys, they're on the shore, cleaning nets and all this kind of stuff. It's the young guys who are stronger and more agile to actually go out into the boats, and try to hauling in a fish. Or a lot of fish in a boat, that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, you've got to have some know-how, and you've also got to have some physical ability. So the older fellows, they're the ones who are on the shore, cleaning the nets, maybe making repairs to them, that kind of thing. And in that moment, Zebedee lost his, who's going to go fishing for us now?
Yeah.
Now we see, we get the other stories later on in the Gospels that. After the apostles joined up with Jesus, they seem not to have completely given up the profession of fishing. Like the story of the storm on the sea at night, and the story of the catch after the resurrection. So they must have done. They had to do something to provide for their families. But so when these fishermen anyway chose to follow Jesus, they had to sort of, fit everything in their schedule. They got a lot busier for one.
Sure. Yeah, they definitely got a lot busier.
Yeah.
They got a lot more. They were in for a lot more than they thought they would.
That's certainly the way that's certainly the way it turned out. Yeah. And even we get these stories of Jesus predicting what's going to happen to him in Jerusalem at the end. And the reaction among the apostles is no, that's just not going to happen. Right. And one has to wonder if that's going to happen, what are we doing here? Maybe we should just forget the whole thing.
Yeah.
But they did. And of course, as I say, they bailed when Jesus was arrested, and they hid out for a while even after the resurrection. But in the end, they were faithful to the work that Jesus had called them to, of course, with the single exception of Judas.
That's true. Yep. Yeah. It's the opposite of Judas Iscariot. I mean, everyone betrays him, turns away, but we all have the opportunity to come back to him. And Peter showed that, and Judas didn't. So,
now that you mentioned that, I remember how struck I was as a boy.
Sure.
When and especially during Holy Week, and my mom once said, all Judas would have had to do was to go to Jesus and say, "I'm sorry," and that would have nullified the sin, but he didn't, and of course, went the way that he was supposed to go. But I was always kind of struck by Mom telling me, Judas could have been saved, even after the horrible thing that he had done, if he had just begged forgiveness. But it didn't happen.
No. And yeah, I mean,
but at the same time, on the other hand, Jesus and Peter make it up a little bit, right? In the story of that John tells,
right.
where Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? And by that third time, Peter's sort of like, okay, I get it, I deny you,
Right.
but you know that I love you, and in saying that, Peter's also saying, I wished I had been stronger than that. But of course, it's also at that point that Jesus tells him, well, you know what, my arrest and my crucifixion was a tough event for you, and there are other tough events that lie ahead.
Right. Yeah, because you think that was tough, just waiting to your death. And yeah, it's going to be.
Not only the death, but he and John were flogged.
Right.
We're told in Acts that when the Jewish religious authorities arrested them, said, you're not supposed to be talking about Jesus. As well, we're going to talk about Jesus. Sorry, we can't not do that. Right. And they had them scourged, and they would have had them executed if not for the intervention of of Gamaliel, who said, well, if this is of God, we'll see. We've seen phonies before. This guy Theudas, for instance. Jesus wasn't the only sort of itinerant preacher in Judea of that generation. There are a bunch of these guys, and of course, John the Baptist is one of them. It's just that the others weren't the real thing. John was the real thing, and of course, Jesus was the real thing as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. We're going to have a quick break. We're going to give the doctor some water, and we'll be back in about 30 seconds. Stay tuned with the other part of the show on Peter. Let's see. Yes, Peter of Galilee, shepherd of the early church. Don't want to get that mixed up. So we'll be back in about 30 seconds, folks. Enjoy our advertisers. And we're back. Thank you for JTL and Dr. Joyce Guma for sponsoring today's episode. For more sponsorship, email us at catholict@gmail.com. We also do partnerships that way as well. We're talking about the Peter of Galilee, shepherd of the early church. And I'm going to throw this crowbar at you now, Dr. Shaffern, because this has been on my mind ever since we set up this interview. And maybe you're going to talk a little bit more and just a little bit about it. So I don't really want to maybe shoot the gun too much. I apologize if I'm getting ahead of myself. But since you wrote about Peter and you're really just intrigued by his life and you really relatable to him, was there a person while you're writing the book, or a person that asked you, because the biggest complaint is, well, did Jesus actually give Peter the church, the keys to the church? And of course, we give that in scripture. We come back with that. I guess since you wrote the book, what would you say to someone who would ask you that?
Well, now this is kind of interesting, right? Because Peter, in the story of the denials, Peter is in a sense kind of on his own.
Right.
Jesus is arrested; he's following from a distance. But in the story in Matthew at Caesarea Philippi, which is a very interesting place, a very lovely place. I've been there.
Okay.
But at Caesarea Philippi, Jesus tells Peter, that you are rock, and upon this rock I will found my church, essentially. Now, prior to that, Jesus had been, apparently a little bit weary, a little bit discouraged, and he asks the disciples, "Well, who do you say that I am?" Because some people think maybe he's Elijah come back, or he's a prophet in his own right, and so on.
Right.
But Peter says that you are Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus tells him before he bestows the keys. Jesus tells him, "This was revealed to you, Peter. You didn't figure this out by yourself. Okay? So this was revealed to you by my Father." And okay, and not only that, but you have accepted this. You have taken this into your soul, essentially, as a truth, as a divine truth. And as a consequence, you are my hand-picked leader. So there was a kind of confession of faith on Peter's part, and then the God-man, Jesus himself, right, says to him that you know this because of revelation. And even the sense of the text is though Jesus went from being kind of weary and discouraged because, again, just before this scene, a whole bunch of people leave. This
Right.
Jesus guy is a nut job. What the heck? Peter says, no, the folks who have left are wrong. Okay? And you are the Christ. And Jesus kind of picks up with this, Peter, this was revealed to you by my Father, right? Jesus is often complaining about how little faith he finds among the people he preaches to. And so this expression of faith on Peter's part is for one, hard to find in the rest of the Gospels. And in fact, Jesus often is more, he's more inclined to compliment non-Jews about having faith than among his fellow Israelites.
Right.
But so there's that, and so he says then he says he's going to give the keys to Peter, of course, and he gives him a new name too, which in Aramaic would have been Cephas or Cephas, and which in Greek is Petros, both of which mean rock.
Right.
Now, renaming in Scripture is a prophetic act. Abram gets renamed to Abraham, for instance, and there are a couple of other such stories in Scripture too. So there's that in terms of Peter's position among the 12. Then the other, after the ascension, Peter assumes the position of leader. And the first thing he does actually is replace one of the apostles. He takes on a Christ, he takes on a Christ-like initiative.
True.
None of the others presume to do, not even James or John, and right, Peter, James, and John are called the pillars of the apostles sometimes.
Right.
And so Peter tells the rest of the apostles, well, look, Judas, went the way that he was supposed to go, but now we ought to think about replacing him. And I'm calling up upon you all to join me in figuring out who we can get to replace Judas. And of course, it falls to Matthias,
Right.
who apparently had been a disciple all along, but not one of the apostles. We have to remember too that of Jesus's followers, you sort of have three groups. You have the pillars, James, Peter, and John. You have the 12, and then there's another crowd that in Luke, I think the 70 or the 72, I think it's the 70.
Yeah.
But Luke talks about these disciples, and just like the apostles, they're sent out throughout Judea, Samaria too, probably,
Okay.
to announce that this Jesus of Nazareth has come on the scene, and his message is repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Right? There's agreement among all three synoptics that at the beginning of Jesus's public ministry, that's what Jesus has to say. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, and I am its herald.
Right.
And this is and insofar as Peter gets renamed by Jesus, and without any kind of quarrel from the rest of the 12, has a position of leadership. I really don't know how Peter's position of preeminence can be questioned. Of course, we do have for instance, the scene with Paul later on where Peter stops eating with pagan converts to Christianity.
Right.
Paul says, "Look, these people are Christian too," and apparently Peter says, "Yeah, I know, you're right. I kind of lost my way for a minute there." But Peter's position of leadership is never really assailed in any serious way. Peter does, and besides this, Peter does set up other figures in positions of leadership. When he leaves Jerusalem, he's basically going to go to Antioch.
Right.
There's agreement that James, the figure called either the righteous or the brother of the Lord, he's going to be the head of the Jerusalem community after Peter leaves. Okay, but he's not the head of the whole movement.
Sure.
He's just head of those. A predominant the community of Jerusalem was predominantly converts from Judaism, not exclusively so, but very nearly so.
Yeah.
And that apparently was the mission that James was deemed best suited for.
Okay. No, I did not know all that. So that was quite intriguing, because wow. I mean,
there's another sort of interesting sidelight to this.
Sure.
And Eusebius is the figure we know this from. Until the so-called Bar Kokhba revolt, which was a Jewish revolt against the Romans from 132 to 135. Now, most of us know a little bit more about that earlier one, which took place between 66 and 70. This is a later one. But in any event, the tradition of the Jerusalem church was that its bishop, until the Bar Kokhba revolt, was to come from the family of Jesus, to be a blood relation of Jesus. But that succession was interrupted by the Bar Kokhba revolt and lapsed thereafter.
Oh, wow! I didn't. That's another thing I did not know. So that's crazy.
It appears. I mean, this is the kind of orthodox view on it, and I have a lot of sympathy for it. My guess, and this is also based on another non-biblical book. It's called the Proto-Evangelium of James. So
okay.
the first Gospel of James. Didn't make it into the Bible, but it circulated widely in Christian circles in the first 2-3 centuries of the church's existence. And the Proto-Evangelium of James says essentially that after Mary came of age, she was an oblate. She had been given to the temple to live as a kind of junior nun, if you will, in gratitude for God. Anna and Joachim thanking God for giving them a child. So we're going to, give the child to the temple. Well, when Mary came of age, she couldn't stay there anymore. How is she going to be provided for? And the Proto-Evangelium says that they found this righteous man named Joseph. Joseph said he would take her in. And the implication is that Joseph was rather older. He had already been married and had children with his first wife. And one of the views of this, which I think has a lot to be said for it, was that James, the brother of the Lord, was essentially Jesus's half brother through Joseph.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh?
And then Joseph had brothers. James had brothers. He was succeeded by one of his brothers, who had family, and that's how it was that's how the succession was handed down until the Bar Kokhba revolt in 132, where it was ended.
Sure. 132 AD.
Yeah, 132 to 135. It lasted for 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. No, that's quite intriguing. I'm sure a lot more people are
Yeah,
going
there's a lot of really interesting history in there that doesn't get mentioned much.
Sure. Okay. I know we'll be accurate with your time here today, Doctor. And again, thank you for coming on today. Just a couple more rounding up the show.
Hey.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. What does your account have to contribute to the church life today? Just because, church life today, there's a lot of different alleys or roads people can go down. When you talk about the church life, what does it mean? Is it looking at, some people might look at their own parish and their disastrous situation or something. Someone might look at the overall, virtual church. Yeah. What does that contribute to regular church life today?
Well, I think again, we're kind of limited time here, but I would say above all, two things. Peter's fidelity. Peter, a lot of Catholics today feel kind of, I think, set upon by things happening in secular culture, something's happening in the church, and I get all that. I've felt that myself in no small measure. But Jesus said he wouldn't abandon us. He never lies to us. If you want to have confidence in something, you can always have confidence in the presence and the mission and the promise of Jesus. That is just an inestimable gift to any Catholic Christian. And Peter, of course, was instrumental in formulating the church that witnesses to that mission and to those and to the teachings of Jesus. So that's the one thing. Keep in mind that we are called to the same kind of fidelity throughout the same kind of difficulties that Peter experienced himself, as did many of the other apostles and saints throughout the ages. Right. So that's one. And for another, I would say that even aside from religious matters, he was a fellow. He was an individual and a figure a lot like us, and and that must mean that we are capable of the same kinds of things of which he was capable, but only if we're open and accept the grace of God. That is a sine qua non. Without God's grace, none of us is strong enough. None of us is unbroken enough to really do that.
Right. Well said. I really like that. And I would like to end the show with this quick question, because I kind of want to get your take on this. What would you, real quickly, what might Peter say to Pope Leo today? Because again, a lot of people either bashing Pope Leo or you love Pope Leo. So what would you say?
Both ends. I think that Peter would just tell Leo that much. The position of the Bishop of Rome is such a in a lot of ways, is a very different thing. There's just so much bureaucracy that's in the Vatican, and even for instance, a figure like Saint Bernard of Clairvaux in the 12th century wrote to his monk, who was Pope Eugene III. He said, "Man, you got a lot of noise around you. What you must do, however, you must do, is you must find quiet time for prayer." who was, I mean, and for instance, Pope John Paul II and Benedict were great exemplars of this.
Right.
Consistently every day throughout all the toil of the office, John Paul being physically degraded for much of his pontificate, but they took time for silent prayer. And I think Peter probably would tell Leo, just remember that in your capacity as Bishop of Rome, your relationship with Jesus, which is nurtured by prayer, is the most important thing about your office, and it's the most important thing you can do as the servant of the servants of God.
Sure. Well said. And I mean, just listening back to the couple of homilies we had the past couple of weekends by a deacon and a priest around here, doctor, they go back to prayer too. It's, you gotta have a prayer. You gotta have silent prayer, and you have to make time for every day, because there's a lot of noise out there, that regardless of what you do.
And most of it is not at all helpful.
No, right? Yeah. So, all right. Well, Dr. Shaffern, thank you again. Shaffern, thank you. Thank you again for your time today. I hope to have you back on again, because this was really fun and learned a lot, and I'm sure the artists did too. So, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Again, the book is Peter of Galilee, Shepherd of the Early Church. We'll have a link down in the description like we always do. You can go and get the book. Hey, I mean, the holidays are only a few months away, folks. It could be a good holiday gift for that Peter enthusiast in your life. Let's put it that way. Stay and say grace, God is sacraments, and we'll see you next time on Catholic Table Talk. All right.
We're out.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Catholic Table Talk podcast, where everything Catholic is on the table. Don't forget to subscribe to Catholic Table Talk on your favorite podcast platform to get new episodes delivered directly to you every Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern.